welcome to this week's episode of our book club reading of Star Wars Aftermath Life Debt by Chuck Wendig. If you want, you can click on this thing right here and it'll take you back to the beginning of the series where we first started looking through this book, chapter by chapter, breaking down the themes and whatnots that happened in this story. Or if you would like, you can click on this one here and it will take you back to the playlist of when we did that with the first book in this trilogy, if you would like to join us starting from there. But with that, let's get into this week. This week we are discussing chapters 22 and 23. And some really big things started to happen in these chapters, and I'm really excited to talk to you about them. So chapter 22 involves Han piloting the Millennium Falcon with Nora, and then Jazz piloting the Halo with the rest of their friends. And they make it to Kashyyyk, and their plan is to go to Kashyyyk with the codes they got from the prison building guy in the previous chapters, so they can actually go in and find Chewbacca in whatever this mysterious prison on Kashyyyk happens to be. I really liked the scene with Han and Nora here in the beginning of the chapter, where they interact with an Imperial official to try to get permission to land. And it shows you so much of who Han is. You know, Han, as we've seen in previous episodes, has this tactical ability. He has this clear leadership ability. But at the end of the day, Han also runs so much on faith and so much on it has to work. So Han just knows he has to go to Kashyyyk and he has to get Chewbacca back, and it's going to work because it has to work, and he's not going to think a whole lot about it. And this type of thing drives Nora and especially Jazz crazy because they want to have this plan and they don't really trust, going into these situations. Han has always kind of had this flying by the seat of his pants ability that really encapsulates his character. And I think this book does this well, showing you Han on this crazy mission, really being overcome with emotion and really not thinking clearly, but not really judging Han too much for it, because I think we all want Chewbacca back too, and it's good that Han kind of has this group of people around him that can kind of help him and work with him in a way where even, say, Luke and Leia may have also been clouded by emotion, but also clouded by their frustrations with Han, and this group, especially Nora, kind of being so excited at the idea of working with Han Solo, can kind of let Han do what Han needs to do. So it's just kind of an interesting dynamic. They eventually BS their way onto the planet, and we think they do it successfully, but then at the end of the chapter we find out that it's actually because the official has called Sloane out of a Shadow Council meeting, and Sloane kind of lets them pass, but she ultimately lets them pass at Rax's behest. So here's another point where Puppet Master Rax is kind of pulling the grand schemes. He's having Sloane do things that she just does not understand, for reasons she does not understand. And this scene is particularly creepy because as she listens to him and does what he wants, the book describes him kissing her on her brow in a way that's almost to bless her. And it's like Rax's creepiness level is just kind of amping up a level. And I have to say, my whole perception of Rax has changed. I was having a conversation about various famous figures with some friends of mine in the Star Wars Reference Discord, which is Star Wars Reference is a really cool follow. They do a lot of really in-depth timelines and reviews, really setting up the specifics of a lot of stuff in Star Wars Galaxy, and if you really like the details, I highly recommend checking them out. But one of my buddies on their Supreme Leader, Hondo, made a piece of fan art for me after I said that Elon Musk should play Rax. But basically, we were having a conversation because Elon Musk was on the set of The Mandalorian. People were speculating who he might play, and I posited that he could play Rax. And then my buddy Supreme Leader Hondo made this piece of art showing off Elon Musk as Rax, and I can't unsee it now. So from here on out, I'm going to be using this image anytime I talk about Rax. So anyway, Rax convinces Sloane against her better judgment to allow the Falcon and the Halo to land on Kashyyyk for reasons and schemes that we do not yet know. Really quickly before we move on, I want to talk about a really cool Easter egg that was in this chapter. I don't necessarily remember catching this any time prior, but it's pretty cool. The Imperial official refers to Kashyyyk by the designation G5-623, and I thought that sounded familiar, and I looked it up, and it turns out it is the same numerical designation if you've played Knights of the Old Republic, and you go to Kashyyyk. There's a guy who represents Zerka Corp there, and he calls the planet, I think it's Eden, but it looks like a D and they spell it weird. But that has the same numerical designation, and I thought that was a really cool reference. Obviously, it's something in legend, so it's not the same, and it's 2,000 years before this book, and it's Zerka and not the Empire. But it was really fun to see the planet have the same kind of crazy name designation, especially because this chapter, we'll see in the next chapter, has a lot of concepts using towards the Old Republic, so I feel like it's something that Wendig might have saw while doing some research. But I really like this as a reference, and it ties into a lot of conversations Professor Jango and I have been having in light of us going through the new Jedi Order on the difference between using a reference as a fun Easter egg and using a reference to kind of beat the reader over the head with past information. So one of the things we've been doing as we've been reading through the new Jedi Order is to kind of encourage other people to read through the new Jedi Order, and it seems daunting because these books constantly reference things that have happened in 20 other books that took place before them, and especially the books we're reading now, which is the Agents of Chaos duology by James Luceno. I don't know if any of you are familiar with James Luceno, but James Luceno cannot go like more than a paragraph without making some sort of crazy obscure Star Wars reference. So I was thinking about it as I was reading these chapters that I just caught one of these crazy obscure Star Wars references, and the idea of do I like these? Do I think these add to Star Wars? And obviously we all might have differing opinions on this type of thing. But for me, I like crazy obscure references like this when they're just kind of there, and if you catch them, great, that's fun, and if you don't catch them, that's fine, right? If I had not have caught this reference to Knights of the Old Republic, I wouldn't have lost any kind of understanding for the chapters going forward. But if they had referred to the planet as this numerical designation instead of Kashyyyk, I might have been confused, right? And that's a little bit of an exaggeration of some stuff you can see in other books. But sometimes other books go on such a reference quest where they're throwing out all this other stuff that it can be hard to tell if this is relevant to the story, that you need to understand the story, or is it really there and as a gift for fans to understand. And that's something I've really liked about these Aftermath books going through, is there's so many references, so many shout-outs to other stuff in Star Wars, whether it's Legends or current, well, what would become current canon, because these were pretty early on in canon. But it's never done in a way where you feel dumb if you don't get the reference. And it's never done in a way where you're missing something if you don't get the reference. It's done very much in a way where if you get the reference, it's like whipped cream on top of your sundae, but you don't really lose anything if you don't get the contrary. And that's something I really appreciate about these books, at least in general. So then we get to chapter 23, and a lot happens in chapter 23. It was, I think, 20 pages in its own right. But effectively, the crew goes into the prison itself. They leave Timon and Bones out as a rear guard. Han and Jazz go one way, Jom, Singer, and Nora go the other. And after they take a couple steps inside, the AI that runs the prison comes on. And this was a really funny part of the book, because the book's like, what's the password? And Nora's like, huh? And it's like, huh? Isn't a password. And then you get 2 more tries, and then Han does them. And it was really funny, because it was Han like, where is this? Give me Chewbacca. And it was this really intense moment where you're like, Han, don't screw this up. Han, don't screw this up. Han, don't screw this up. Han, and then Han screws it up. So it was pretty good. But it was very tense, because then the base comes alive, and there's all these droids attacking, and Nora herself almost gets caught. She is caught, and she's ultimately rescued by Bones. And you're really worried because they're stuck inside this base, and they were basically still betrayed by this prison architect guy, because he told them how to get in, but he didn't tell them what the password was for once they were actually inside the base. They discover that the prison itself is a crashed prison ship from back in the Old Republic days, so like the KOTOR era days, where it was a prison that used to sit in a gravity well. Gravity well got wiped out, and so then the prison like crashed down onto the surface. The Wookiees kind of kept an eye on it because they thought it was cursed for a long time. Eventually the Empire found it and turned it into a prison. This was really fun because I feel like current canon hasn't gotten into Old Republic era lore yet, and a large reason why they haven't done that is actually the only part of Legends canon that's currently still active is the Old Republic MMO, and I don't think Disney wants to outright wipe that slate clean as long as that game exists and is making them money from subscriptions, but at the same time, they don't really want to make that game canon either. Like, the Old Republic is non-canon, is Legends, just as much as any other Legends book. So it's kind of this awkward space, so they don't really delve into that time very much. So it was fun to see some kind of reference to it. They mentioned the name of the people that built the ship. I looked it up, and at least according to Wikipedia, they're not mentioned anywhere else, so this seems to be something that's entirely new to lore. The other horrifying thing they find out about the prison is that the prison's power source is the people in the station. So it's like this weird Matrix style thing where people go in these pods and they're put in stasis, and their bioelectricity like powers the station. And it's pretty horrifying. And Nora actually has a vision as she goes through this. She sees Singer, who is locked up, and then she gets drugged again, and then she starts having visions of her husband yelling and screaming at her, guilt-tripping her for never coming to rescue her. So it's this thing of this horrible fate of being locked in stasis sleep for forever while your body powers a station. And of course, as always, the best part of the chapter was Mr. Bones, who takes on like every single droid in the entire station by himself. I liked that at one point the book described him as pirouetting through the air as he fights all of these droids, and he had some pretty amazing lines too when he was talking to Timon. So as always, Bones is like my favorite character in these books. But that's actually all I really have for today. There wasn't as much I wanted to talk about, which is fine. It was a very action-oriented set of episodes. We're finally getting to the meat of the story, so I'm very excited with that. For next week, let's go ahead and read the Interlude and chapters 24 and 25. So Interlude chapters 24 25, and we will get into that in the next video. If you are not already, please consider following us on our various social medias. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, we have a Discord, we have a website, we have all sorts of ways that you can come and interact with us. I would love to hear from you, and of course, please leave a comment on what you think of the story so far. I love seeing your guys' comments. I love seeing you guys comment with each other. It means a lot to me, so thank you so much again for always being with me on this ride, and I will see you guys next week.